Good evening, Mount Olive. We want to welcome you to this Bible study as we continue this series related to the conflict that's happening in Israel and in Palestine. We want to thank you for joining us. We took a break. Well, we didn't take a break last week, but last week was the Thanksgiving service, so we're resuming this study. So we would like to first start off with a word of prayer. Join me. God, we thank you for this time that we have come together to dig into this issue. We pray that your Holy Spirit would be here with us. We pray that you would continue to soften our hearts and also strengthen our resolve to pursue justice and peace. This we ask in the strong name of Jesus, who is the Christ. Amen.
Amen.
So we have a special guest today. It is, you can guess which one is the special guest. We're joined here by none other than Rabbi Jack Moline. And if you would give me a couple seconds, you know you're somebody when you have a Wikipedia page, and it's a very long Wikipedia page devoted to you.
Or you have a good friend who's willing to write a Wikipedia page for you.
Indeed. So just to give you a little bit background, he was the recently retired executive director for the Interfaith Alliance. He's well regarded, well known within American Judaism. Newsweek magazine counted him as one of the top pulpit rabbis in America, number 3 on a list of 25. And accolade after accolade, he is well known within the interfaith world, and we're just so happy that he decided to come on down here to Mount Olive Baptist Church to join us for this discussion on Israel-Palestine. So thank you for coming here.
It is an honor to be with you today.
Rabbi, again, thank you for sharing with us. We treasure your perspectives. We have been wrestling with this for the last few weeks as we were all horrified by the events that have transpired. And so one of the things that we try to do here as a congregation and a people of faith is to discover, what does justice look like? And so we've tried to, we've shared our experiences. We've been to Israel. I've been to Israel twice. We've looked at this from different perspectives, and so we're glad that you're here with us tonight. To be fair, we invited some imams to come, but either for booking reasons or just they declined our invitations. And so we are so thankful that you have come to share with us, and we hope we'll have a rich dialogue. We want a dialogue and not a diatribe. So any questions that you might have of the rabbi, please frame them respectfully, because we might want him to come again. And so thank you so much for coming to share with us.
You're welcome, and don't worry about confrontations. My wife and I raised 3 children through teenage years, so I can handle anything you can throw at me.
Absolutely. So just to refresh our memory as to what we have been speaking about for the past few weeks, the first week, and then I'll hand it over to Pastor from there. The first week you really wrestled with your paper, your statement paper written for the Lot Carey Foreign Mission Society with Reverend Xavier Johnson, in which you took a trip over to Israel, and we're just recapping, and you went to Israel, and he spent most of his time in Palestine.
Yes.
And you came back and wrote a joint paper about the experience and had some recommendations for, I guess, the Lot Carey denomination or organization, right? And then the second week, I'll turn it over to you.
I forgot what did we do.
No, that's why I turned it over to
you. we looked at issues of the land.
Yes, the history.
And the history, and as we painted very broad, simplistic brushstrokes of the occupation of the land, and we hopefully did justice in terms of how we've come to this point in history. And that's where we spent most of our time. Then, like you said, last week we were...
The third week
took
was just war.
Yes, then we looked at just war and Augustine. And so now we're here. And really what we want to talk about is how do you see things evolving? And then because Christian tradition as well as the Jewish tradition is laden with issues and ideas of justice. What does justice look like in this kind of very convoluted and complex and sometimes contradictory context?
So we'll start with a simple question.
All right.
Okay, good. You know, it's, if you were to ask me from 30,000 feet what justice looks like, I would tell you it is two peoples, each in their own lands, good neighbors, living according to the values and the cultures that they consider to be, we'll use religious language, sacred, and recognizing that they have a common humanity and a common stake in making it work. That's what justice looks like from 30,000 feet. I don't live at 30,000 feet, none of us do. I live here on the ground with both of my feet. And I come from a family that has, over the centuries, traveled the world, beginning in Israel, Palestine, and landing me at this point in my life here in the United States. I have family who lives in Israel. And so the deepest desire of my heart in terms of justice is that they get to live in peace and in whatever relative prosperity is available to all peoples there. Now, the next question you're going to ask me is how we accomplish that, and I don't have an answer for that. It requires an open heart on the part of everybody in that territory, everybody. A heart that values not just the concept of justice, but the sacredness of life and the recognition, as it says, both in the Talmud, the record of our conversations of the Bible among the ancient rabbis, and in the Quran, the teaching that a person who saves a single life saves an entire world, a person who destroys a single life destroys an entire world, and that we were all descended from a single human being, so that, as the Talmud also says, no person can say to another, my father was greater than yours.
Just for the benefit of some of us who are here who may not know what the Talmud is, would you give a brief, very brief and concise explanation of the Talmud?
Sure.
Because we are familiar with the Hebrew Bible, which of course we call the Old Testament, but the First Testament, we may not all be familiar with the Talmud.
Good. So for a period of about 700 years, from the first century before Jesus, the first century before the Common Era, until the sixth century, the sages who were the original rabbis discussed various points of law and philosophy and legend, and those discussions were compiled into a very long book that is called the Talmud. Talmud means learning or teaching. It consists of two parts: the Mishnah, which is the statement of what you might call church law, and the Gemara, or the Talmud, which is the discussion of those things, which runs very far afield. So it's ancient literature that is studied intensely, particularly by contemporary Jewish scholars of all types.
To give an analogy for us in the Christian tradition, they would be similarly, loosely equivalent to commentaries.
Yes, although there are commentaries on the Bible that is not Talmud.
Right.
Right. Right.
But just to paint a loose analogy.
Yes.
So I think you framed it, I can't help but say I love how you framed it in terms of that there's this view of justice your view of justice, rather, means that if I was to, I'm going to paint very broad strokes here, so please
Go ahead.
let me hear it. Two states living in peace and prosperity for both states. I think there's been a lot of conversation around what happened in 1948, right,
Yeah.
with the creation of the land of Israel. And we spent some time, to be honest, talking about the history of the land, right? How, it was in so many folks' hands over the year, right? And I think there's a lot of tension around how Israel acquired the land in 48 and how Palestinians have been treated since that time. That is now creating, I think, some aggression on, or not even aggression, or some conflict in folks' minds on, well, who's to say whose land it is in the end, right? And I know there's quite a few viewpoints on that, but I'm curious to hear, what would you have to say to that, to say, like, I mean, the prevailing argument is that, hey, it's the Palestinians' land. Israel took the land from them, right? How do we help balance that? What's your thoughts on that?
Well, if we're going to start in 1948, we're going to have a political discussion. If we're going to start biblically, we got to start a long time before that. That little slice of land, as you know, on that western edge of the Mediterranean, I'm sorry, the eastern edge of the Mediterranean. Well, if you go the other way, it's the western edge, but the eastern edge of the Mediterranean has been much desired and much conquered over the centuries. The Babylonians, the Egyptians, the Syrians, everybody wanted a piece of that land and has had it. The Turks and then the British in more modern times were the most recent empires to lay claim to that land. And as I'm sure you studied, in 1948, as the Brits were desperately trying to deconstruct their empire, they turned to the United Nations in the hopes of relinquishing their control over that land without creating chaos. And they might have come sort of close, but they didn't. The United Nations decided to take that land and to split the British mandate into a Jewish state and a Palestinian state with borders that are not identical to the borders that exist around modern Israel today. There was a war that broke out immediately when Israel declared its independence, and that's how the modern state of Israel was born in May of 1948. But the move to return to the land, whether it was as a nation state or just as a homeland, began earlier than that in Europe with the disenfranchisement of Jewish communities throughout all of Europe. And the worst of that, as you know, because you know your history, was what eventually became known as the Holocaust, when the Nazis tried to scrub Europe of its Jewish presence and what they called its Jewish influence. And so the confluence of a 100-year-long effort on the part of Jews primarily in Europe to return to their homeland, and the war against the Jews that was conducted by the Nazis, culminating in World War II, brought hundreds of thousands, millions of Jews to that part of the world, which was the historical land of the Jewish people. Now, at the same time, unfortunately, the people who were coming home, and I want to say coming home and not colonizing, because Jews were displaced from Israel the way that Black Americans are displaced from Africa. If you go back far enough, that's where we were from. The Jews who came home did not well consider that there were other indigenous people living in that land as well. Those are people who are today called Palestinians. It's an unusual name before modern times because it was the Roman name for that land. And ironically, there's no P sound in Arabic. So Arabs never would have named it Palestine. They they would have named it Palestine, but they wouldn't have called it that because Palestine was named for the Philistines, who were not either Jews or Palestinians.
It's complicated.
If it were easy, I wouldn't be sitting here tonight. So the Palestinians were displaced from their land. If you ask Israelis, they will tell you they were displaced by the Arab nations that said, abandon your property, we will fight a war against these Jews and you'll return to it in triumph. And you'll not only have what you had, but you'll have what they had too. That's the Israeli side of the story. If you ask the Palestinians, they'll say, these Jews came in from Europe and ran us off our land, and we didn't have any choice in the matter, and we wound up in refugee camps. I don't care what that story is. I really don't care. That's everybody's homeland. And everybody, as I said earlier, everybody has a right to live their lives in self-determination in a land of shared values, which ideally includes hospitality for those who are different than you are, and full enfranchisement as citizens of a nation state without any kind of necessity of accepting a particular religion, a particular political philosophy, or a particular way of thinking, other than, as we say here in the United States, we're all entitled to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So I don't know if that answers the question, but it frames how I look at things. When I, from a very partisan point of view, from a very pro-Israel point of view, I look at the situation over there that causes me enormous angst.
And so, what would you see as, other than a hardness of heart from many fronts, what would you see are the preclusive factors from achieving a two-state solution? Even if that, and ancillary to that, in the current climate, do you feel that that's even feasible or tenable?
Yeah. I think that what's behind all of this is fear. I think that the history of all the peoples who have lived there, is that there is always someone out to get you. And very few people are willing to take a chance on living together peacefully because they are afraid if they're not the strong one, they're going to be the dead one. And I don't know how I, or we, sitting here in the relative comfort and stability of America, can reassure people who have been through wars and exploitations and rebellions and revolutions and broken promises. I don't know how we can say to them, don't be afraid. I think I would be afraid as well. I have a nephew who lives in Jerusalem. He and his wife have 3 wonderful children, and I worry about them every day. They're living very happy lives, but I worry about them every day.
That's something to soak in, the notion of fear and how it really shapes and molds behaviors, and then also public policy.
Yes.
I have a sermon that I'm toying with out of the book of Exodus that talks about, and there was a Pharaoh that did not know Joseph.
Right.
And his fear created a public policy
Yes.
of genocide.
Yes.
And I think at some point it may require bold, courageous leadership from somewhere, and who knows where that will come, that will say, we have nothing to fear but fear itself.
So in the book of Exodus, I can tell you where that leadership came from. It came from the 2 midwives who were unwilling to carry out Pharaoh's plan.
But we fear God.
Exactly right. Exactly right. It's noteworthy that it's women, and I can't help but notice.
This is a church.
Yes,
I don't know if y'all had that problem in the synagogue, but it is a church.
it's not a problem. It's a blessing. It takes people who are willing to do what is right and what they know is right and what they know is sacred and what they know is holy, to stand up and not be afraid and show that there can be another way. And what an irony that the thing that Pharaoh feared most is actually what came to pass, and yet throughout the rest of the Torah, throughout the rest of the 5 books of Moses, the instruction is given to the Israelites over and over again, do not hate the Egyptians. Do not hate the Egyptians. And you got your freedom. Now love them like you're supposed to.
So what do you think it's going to take, after what you said about the real palpable nature of fear, to overcome that and get to a morally courageous posture that can indeed cast a vision for the kind of commonality of the human family that's required in this moment?
The answer to that starts in every heart. But the practical answer to that starts in every government. Israel needs a different kind of leadership than it has had for the past 20 years. It simply does. And the Palestinians need a different kind of leadership than they've had for the entire history of their country. I have the pleasure of knowing Ambassador Dennis Ross, who was the leader of the team that tried to negotiate the implementation of the Oslo agreements with Yasser Arafat when he was chairman of the PLO. And Ambassador Ross told me, and it's not a secret, he wrote it in his book, that he became persuaded that there would not be peace between the Israelis and the Palestinians under those agreements because Arafat was not willing to stand up to the rejectionist party in his government. And it has led to a corrupt Fatah, a corrupt Palestinian leadership in the West Bank, and they were overthrown by Hamas in the 2016 elections, the last elections that were held in Gaza, and we've seen what Hamas is capable of and what it's interested in. Hamas is on record as saying they want to obliterate Israel. The current government in Israel is not on record as saying they want to obliterate the Palestinians, but over the last few weeks, they've certainly been on record as saying they want to obliterate Hamas, and they have gone about doing that. It's going to take people willing to be honest leaders, willing to trust in the goodness and the willingness of their people to make peace. In very different circumstances, that is exactly the problem we have had frequently in this country. Forgive me for being a little political here, but...
Oh, it's welcomed.
Good.
It may not be agreed with, but it's welcomed.
We had that problem here for 4 years until the last election, and we may have it again. And we have to be careful not to put people in place with power who do not have the best interests of their people at heart, but rather the best interests of their own parochial interests. And I think those are the governments that we have in both Israel and the various iterations of Palestine right now. They are people who are saying the right words, but they're not doing the right things.
And we're seeing that spread also to other parts of Europe as well.
You betcha.
Oscar Wilde once said that the books that we read choose us as much as we choose them. Mm-hmm. And ironically, even before the conflict exacerbated, I was reading Heschel.
Good for you.
And one of the things that I hear you saying is that there's going to be the need for prophets.
Yes.
You talk about each person having a transformation of the heart, but both of our traditions are laden with prophets and a reliance on the prophets. Are there prophets extolling that kind of message now, either in Israel or in the diaspora or wherever they may be found? Because I think prophets often thrive on the margins. You mentioned Ruah and Shiphrah earlier, marginalized persons by virtue of their gender. Are there prophets, or have we come to the point where Marvin McMichaels asked, where are the prophets? And his conclusion was, they're dead. Because the very act of being prophetic often draws the ire, as you rightfully said, of systems of power.
So I'd offer a slight correction to what you just said. It always draws the ire of systems of power. If you read the Bible, if you read Heschel, you know that the prophets were never popular in their time. Never. They always brought a message that resonated through the ages, but not through the halls of power. And
I like that.
And that's what we're facing now. If a prophet were to arise today and give us the solution to this, we'd stone him. Or we'd condemn him to run in the Iowa primaries, one of the two. And it's just, look, I think most of us in the religion business have a tendency to think that a prophet is someone who says what I say, but doesn't have to say it every Sunday or Saturday, right? So I don't think that I can point to someone and say that person is a prophet. I can point to people who I think are wise on this subject, but I don't want to bestow a title on them that they will only earn a generation from now. Mm-hmm. So the prophets are indeed dead, but not because they were killed, but because they're not recognized as prophets until after their time.
In their own time.
Yeah. Yeah. But
so then if we use your model of Ruah and Shiphrah, then that means every person has the capacity, if they are morally governed, with to use Schleiermacher's word, God consciousness.
Yes.
Has the capacity to become prophetic.
And
without the title or an office.
And what disables that is the fear I talked about earlier. All right? You can't have courage unless you're afraid. If you're not afraid, it's not courage, it's just the way you walk the world. If you're afraid of something and you stand up to it and you seek to overcome it, then you're brave, then you have courage, and then you have the capacity to be a prophet. Otherwise, to just go along to get along, we're never going to get anywhere that we aren't right now, because there are people willing to step up into that void and take advantage of it, and they're running the various entities in the Middle East right now. A few of them here in this country, too, and Europe, and Asia, and everywhere.
Since I'm the only one that hasn't said anything about Heschel, I didn't come prepared with a Heschel quote.
Oh, good.
Right? And it helps to frame what we've been talking about. Leads us, so for those who don't know, Abraham Joshua Heschel, we've said the name a few times in Bible study over, but he was a professor at, was it JTS?
The Jewish Theological Seminary.
The Jewish Theological Seminary.
Union.
And Union.
And Union.
And Union Theological Seminary.
It's rare for a Jewish person to hold a seat at a Christian seminary.
He was the first one at Union.
Yeah, first one.
phenomenal. He literally was a contemporary of King and actually marched with King in the Selma March, the third Selma March with John Lewis and Dr. King. But he was a mystic, a extraordinaire philosopher, all that. But he has this quote. I think it's from taken from Tikkun. I was just at an event with Hebrew College just yesterday, and they raised it, and I said, this is perfect. Heschel says, there's a longing for peace in the hearts of men and women, but peace is not the same as the absence of war. Right. Peace among people depends upon a relationship of reverence for each other. Peace will not come until people return out of the exile from each other, and Sarah and Hagar, Isaac and Ishmael can embrace upon peaceful shores. Peace will not come until we renounce excessive self-concern and allow our hearts to be moved enough by the misery of our fellow human beings to dare what must be dared, right? And that's what Heschel says around how we get to peace. I think it draws upon some of the things you guys were saying here, that peace really will happen if we can't win a war into peace. We can't war ourselves into peace. It really has to be cooler heads or better angels, whichever analogy you want to take, has to sit down and talk and have that dialogue and see the misery, as he says, be moved enough by the misery of our fellow human beings. And I think that is what makes this, I think, conflict very difficult, is seeing the misery and the pain that is happening. Definitely, was it October 7th, what happened in Israel, and then the misery and the pain of the Palestinian people in the West Bank post October 7th. And I think from a Christian, or from at least my point of view, I don't know how Christian it is, right? But from my point of view, it's hard and it's difficult to see that pain on both sides and call both sides wrong at times and say, what Hamas did to Israel is evil, and also the response, and when you see pictures of kids and what have you, what Israel's response is also wrong. How do you balance all that? Is that the courage that is needed? I guess, is that what is prophetic, to speak out on both sides?
Yeah.
And I think in our highly polarized country, if you say Israel's wrong, sometimes you're labeled as anti-Semitic. If you say Palestine's wrong, you're also called racist. So it's like you can't win. But is that the courage that needs to be mustered up so that we can identify the misery that both sides are enduring right now without being both-sidism at the same time? I feel like it's jumping through hoops with language these days. But yeah.
I'm going to give you a very different answer to that question than I would have if this had all happened in August instead of October. So this past summer, as I said, we have 3 kids. This past summer, all 3 of my children became parents in a 6-week period. We had 3 grandchildren between the beginning of June and the middle of July.
Congratulations.
Thank you. There's more to this story, and it is not happy. One of the babies was born with a heart condition that required surgery, a surgery that is done probably a dozen times a week at Johns Hopkins in Baltimore. And after all of the right examinations and evaluations, Oliver went in for surgery in the middle of September, and the surgery was successful, but there was some sort of post-op complication that they were not able to correct, and Oliver died. Oliver died on October 5th. And so we were mourning the death of my daughter Julia's first baby, the first of those 3 babies that was born this summer, when we got the news of what had happened on October 7th to Israelis at the hands of Hamas. And as we mourned that week, the week of mourning that is set aside for death in our tradition, we were witnesses to the beginning of what happened in Gaza at the hands of the Israelis who had vowed to wipe out Hamas, and in the process, despite what I think were their best efforts, managed to wipe out a lot of innocent people as well. And I got to tell you, a dead baby is a dead baby. I cannot imagine a claim to humanity of anyone who would purposely do to a parent or grandparent what the circumstances of medical bad luck did to us. And I can't imagine the humanity of anyone who would rejoice or even justify that kind of pain inflicted on especially innocent people, even in an act of what might be necessary or just war. So the very first thing that I have to react to in this is an absolute rejection of the justification of what either side has done as being necessary or righteous. It may be practical, but it is not the only thing that can be done. And it may be conducted as sensitively or as insensitively as possible. You don't put a GoPro camera on your head and film yourself shooting people and say that, you know, the Israelis made me do it or the devil made me do it or whatever it happens to be. You may be able to find a way to justify it, but you can't claim it's righteous. And I got to tell you, I don't know what to do with that, because every time I hear about the babies, I cry. Every time. Today, just before I came, I was watching the news, and Hamas is now claiming that the 10-month-old baby that they kidnapped and his 2-year-old brother and his parents, they're claiming that they're dead. You see a picture of this baby? He is such a sweet-faced little child, as sweet as Oliver. And Oliver's hair was red, just like his. I have a choice of being sad or angry about that. And I think before this happened to us, I would have chosen angry. Now I can only be sad and look for a way to bring this to a lasting and just end, rather than trying to find a way to justify what needs to be done in order to make sure it doesn't happen again. We just have to find a way to love each other, and it is easy to love people you already love. It is hard to love people who have given you every reason not to love them. But I got a feeling that message is delivered here often enough from the pulpit and from that book you have in front of you. So
we pray that you find some comfort in all of this.
Thank you. Thank you. Being able to talk about it is a tremendous comfort, and so I appreciate the opportunity to tell that story.
And we thank you for your transparency and your honesty. We've been talking religion, because that's what we do. From different points of view, but we're still talking religion and theology. I'm curious to hear your perspective about how people of faith can inform politics. Particularly in this kind of context where you have a milieu that is so laden with hostility, undergirded with a near impenetrable fear. How do people of faith tell our politicians to stop the madness, and that, to use Pauline language, there is a more excellent way?
Yeah.
And you know, Dr. King always used to say that the church is not the government, but it should be the government's conscience. And I don't know because if whether or not we are only getting limited news sources or news sources that are of a particular angle and bent, to know if we are hearing religious voices informing political decisions.
I am a passionate believer in the First Amendment and the separation of church and state, religion and politics, religion and government, I should say. So while I think it is extraordinarily important for every human being to have a grounding in what they believe is just and moral in the world, and what the guiding principles are that help direct them take their steps in any direction in life, I don't think that there is a faith answer to what seem to be intractable political conflicts.
Interesting.
We saw that experiment happen in medieval Europe, and it was catastrophic for anybody who didn't subscribe to whatever the official line was. So it's incredibly important that in the privacy of the soul, in the confines of the conscience, that people who lead us have a well-developed sense of what is right and wrong, what is moral and what is evil. But it is equally important that we not become, in any sense of the word, a theocracy, because there isn't a one of us who can articulate God's will unless they're quoting from a book. And so I don't want to vote for someone who says, only I can save this nation. There's only one who can save this nation, and it is not anyone who's walking around today.
I hear you, but there must be a role for religion in the body politic.
Oh, yeah.
Even though I wholeheartedly agree with you that, at least in this country, one of the bedrock principles, which we have seen breached with the rise of Christian nationalism,
Yep.
that there is and we see now in the courts a leaning toward Christian nationalism.
Yep.
At some point, though, we still have to have, people of faith have to have a role in the body politic.
Absolutely.
I think informing, cajoling, I mean, I am, second generation of the civil rights movement. And the gains that I have seen and some of the liberties that have been acquired as a result of my parents and grandparents and their political activism, which I equate to a spiritual activism.
Yep.
I mean, my grandfather was a preacher. I have a picture of him sitting at a lunch counter in Lexington, Kentucky, which is, well, I'm from Kentucky. He pastored in Lexington. There has to be a role for religion in the body politic.
Yes.
And I'm wondering, again, even with the separation of church and state, what exactly do you feel that role to be?
Well, I'll quote two great Jewish sources. One is the Talmud. I don't have to do that again, right?
No.
And the other is my mother-in-law.
A great Jewish source.
A great source of Jewish wisdom. The Talmud says, pray for the welfare of the government, for without it, people would eat each other alive. So there is a sacred value to a reliable government that takes its direction from that kind of spiritual wisdom. My mother-in-law, whenever anybody would complain about something, would say, you've got a mouth, use it. Those of us whose lives are saturated with with the Spirit, which I presume includes at least the three of us up here, and most likely those of you out there. I can't talk to you people online because I don't know who you are. But anybody who's saturated with the Spirit comes to conclusions about the right and proper way for people to live together peacefully and in sacred community. And we each have a vote, we each have a voice, and we each have the ability to organize into groups of people who will make themselves known to the people who are charged with governing us. You have to seek out those opportunities. Let me brag for a moment that for about the past 20 years, I've been meeting every other week with a group of United States senators, none of whom is Jewish, and a Methodist minister and another leader. And we have a reflection group that meets for an hour to talk about the intersection of their public service and their spiritual life. We would call it a Bible study, except we don't use the Bible. And we talk with these 6 senators about what it means to lead this country, what their responsibilities are, what their values are. I am positive, because they've told me, that I have had a tremendous influence on the way they think about things, even though I've never said to them, and the Bible says you should do this, or God says you should do that, or Rabbi Moline, who's an even greater authority, says that you should do this third thing. The best we can hope for is to kindle within them a constant awareness of the spirit of goodness for all the people of this country that we hope is what drew them into public service to begin with. But I'm reluctant to say that there is any religion or every religion that ought to be determinative in how this country should be governed. That's why we're a democracy and not based in a particular faith or particular denomination or even a particular rejection of faith or denomination. Mm-hmm. That's the glory and the danger of democracy.
I hear what you say about prayer, and borrowing from Heschel, prayer in that context is not a passive engagement or enterprise.
No, sometimes you're praying with your feet, which is
what he says. Yes,
right.
You have to pray with your feet.
Right.
Which, and we come out, at least as African Americans and Baptists in particular, come out of a particular protest tradition that is grounded in spirituality. And I think it's important for us to make that demarcation that praying is not just assembling and communing with God, but it is actually, to use Heschel, praying with your feet.
Right, absolutely. One of the reasons that Heschel was not embraced as a prophet in his time and was only embraced as a prophet after his time is because, and there will be those who disagree with me, but too bad, they're not here and I am, is because I think that the experience of Jewish communal life through the centuries has been one in which, when protest was raised, dark consequences followed. And so really until the civil rights movement, and maybe even a little beyond, there was not a lot of Jewish political activism in this country. Mm-hmm. I think that the community descended from African enslaved people did not have that fear inculcated in them and were willing to take the chances with spiritual leaders like Dr. King and so many others, and willing to stand up and show what could be done if you were to pray with your feet. It's not an accident that there were half a dozen rabbis who marched with Dr. King on that Bloody Sunday, and maybe 50 more who showed up in the South. Most of the Jews who were there were not religious people. A lot of the Jews who lived in the South at that time were afraid of what the civil rights movement would mean for them, and so they absented themselves. But the people who had both the most to gain and the most to lose, who were the blacks in the South, and the people willing to organize them from the pulpits, were the ones who really gave courage to the tin men in the Jewish community.
And in all honesty and fairness, even though you talk to many clergy persons of that age and era, you know, everybody marched with Dr. King.
That's right.
Not everybody did march with Dr. King. That's the first thing.
But you can stop any Israeli.
And I would slightly give a different bent on it. I think the African American community, at least informed and conscious African American clergy, did see Heschel as a prophet in his age, and because
that's right.
He was willing to, one, ally himself.
Yep.
And then he spoke with such moral audacity and spiritual courage to elicit that kind of respect and a hearing, because not few did.
You know, there's a documentary about Heschel.
Yes.
Called Spiritual Audacity. I was a consultant. But it was made right here in Alexandria. The
Really?
Documentarian, Martin Dobelmeyer, he spoke at our synagogue just last month. He would be more than willing to come here and show his film and talk about Heschel if you want it. I'll put you in touch with him.
Okay, we might do that. We might do that, because that's one of his. I was telling Reverend Laban that line of, well, Susanna actually compiled the writings for the text, but it was taken from a line that he wrote JFK,
Right.
which basically called for reparations.
Yep.
From every white person and every white congregation in the nation. And this is in 1961 or 63, I think.
Right.
Well, Kennedy is assassinated in 63. Right. So 61, I think it is, which is incredibly ahead of its time. But it is also a rather daring proposition, because now he's really talking about redistributing wealth at a very basic level, a fundamental level, which, and eventually that's where Dr. King lands philosophically and theoretically. So I think I think we did recognize him to be a prophet in his time.
Ahead of us once again.
At least those that came out of the protest tradition.
Yeah.
And those that were shaping the movement. Listen, we are at 7 o'clock. We want to give 8. Yes, excuse me. We want to give some time. Thank you for such a rich dialogue. We want to give room, at least a little room for questions, either online or those of you who may be here in person. All right,
but when this happens, I'm never sure if I have been so comprehensive that there's nothing left to ask, or if I've put you all to sleep. I never know which it is.
Let me assure you, they do me the same way. So you did not put them asleep. You did not put them asleep. It may just be par for the course.
Going once?
Going once. We're going to play the role of an auctioneer. Going once, going twice. All right, there are no questions. Let's thank our guests. Let's thank our guest, Rabbi Jack Moline, for coming and sharing with us. God bless you. God praise you for your willingness to come.
Don't forget your announcement.
Yes, I'm going to get it. I got to set it up. See, this is media, Rabbi. Media. You got to play the media now. We thank him. Beloved, let me share with you, before we hear the pre-recorded announcements, this Sunday will be the last Sunday to purchase your ticket for the Odyssey Cruise as we culminate our sesquicentennial anniversary. We're coming to a close. It's hard to believe that we are on the cusp of December, and we'll be wrapping up our activities for this year-long celebration. So if you want to get your ticket, this Sunday is the last opportunity to do so. Let me remind you that your $125 includes the Grammy nominated entertainment, that you will have transportation to and from the church to the dock, and you'll be on a warm, comfortable boat with delicious delicacies to your field. And there may even be some room for dancing. So don't y'all send me to hell, all right? And so all of that for $125 with breathtaking views of the capital region. So we encourage you to get your ticket, $125, $60 for those that are 12 and under, and we hope to see you on Sunday. We thank you for your openness and your curiosity, because I think curiosity is the bedrock of discovery. And so we appreciate your willingness to come and grapple with tough issues and be practicing theologians in this day and age. So God bless you. Thank you for those that are online. Thank you for those that are here. Thank our media team. And we'll now hear our announcements.
Hello, and welcome to Mount Olive Baptist Church. Here are your upcoming events and announcements for this week. Our Odyssey Brunch Cruise is 3 weeks away. We will set sail on Sunday, December 17th, and we want to see you there. We are excited to share our special guest vocalist, Mesa. All guests will enjoy a live performance from the Grammy-nominated jazz singer aboard the Odyssey, a unique cruise yacht with unparalleled views of Washington, D.C.'s greatest landmarks. Guests will savor a delicious brunch and enjoy music and dancing. Transportation via a motor coach bus will be provided to and from the church, departing immediately after Sunday morning service. Tickets are $125 for adults and $60 for children under 12. The deadline to purchase tickets is Sunday, December 3rd. We can't wait to celebrate our 150th anniversary with you. It's time to deck the halls at Mount Olive. We are looking for volunteers to help decorate the sanctuary and church building for the Advent season on Friday, December 1st from 1 p.m. to 6 p.m. and Saturday, December 2nd, beginning at 9 a.m. Please scan the QR code on the screen or click the link in the chat to sign up for a time slot. There will be trees to trim and wreaths to hang, so if you love Christmas decorations, come on out. Refreshments will be served and helpers of all ages are welcome. You're invited to make a joyful noise unto the Lord at our 150th anniversary concert. We look forward to worshiping through song as we thank God for 150 years of ministry at Mount Olive. Mark your calendar for Sunday, December 10th at 4 o'clock p.m. to join us for this wonderful occasion of singing, music, fellowship, and praise. Be sure to invite a friend. Come one, come all, to sing unto the Lord. Mount Olive, we have great news to share. We have achieved the halfway mark to our fundraising goal for our school in Haiti, Mission of Grace. We are halfway there, but we still need your support to help the school avoid closing down. Our goal is to raise $50,000 to donate to the school. Your donation will keep the school running to make an impact for children in Haiti. To submit your donation, please visit our website donation portal. You may also donate on Givelify or via mail. We thank you for your generosity toward this cause. Let's continue our journey through Mount Olive's incredible 150 years of history by learning notable Did You Know facts about our church. Fun trivia facts will be included in our weekly e-bulletin. Sign up for our bulletin by scanning the QR code on the screen or clicking the link in the chat. Prizes will be given in December to the individuals who know the most about Mount Olive's history. To win, you've got to play. To play, you need to receive the weekly e-bulletin. Go ahead and scan the QR code on the screen so you can learn more about the rich history of Mount Olive. The holiday season can be difficult after facing the loss of a loved one. Grief Share is a grief recovery support group where you can find healing in a community that understands what you're going through. All are welcome to join our group sessions held on Zoom every Tuesday at 7 o'clock p.m. If you or someone you know needs support throughout the holidays, we would love for you to attend or share the group info with a friend. Registration is open on the church website, and all materials will be provided during your first session. Thank you for listening to our upcoming events and announcements for this week. Stay safe and stay blessed.